Welcome back to Mustang News. I'm your host, Brett Burgonio. Today we're taking a look at the End of Poverty for All Act, a bill that was co-authored by two Cal Poly alumni. They are taking the stage in front of Congress today to testify about this new piece of legislation. Let's cut to the live stream of their testimony.
Thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we will be hearing the testimony of two expert policymakers, Mary and Stephanie, in regard to the proposed End Poverty for All Act. I want to thank you two for appearing before us today and want to get right into it. You two were consulted heavily during the authoring of the legislation. Can you please tell us how you started this process?
Yes, of course. We were able to follow an eightfold path that allowed us to examine the issue from many perspectives. We clearly laid out the issue that we saw when it came to poverty in the United States. There's a clear disconnect between those living in poverty and the resources that are available to them. In a recent report, it was found that nearly 30% of those living in deep poverty were not receiving any form of assistance from existing programs. This is a shocking statistic that caught our attention.
It's clear that there's an issue. 30% of Americans were living without a social safety net, and we were determined to find out why and how to solve this issue. We first needed to assemble evidence. What is causing this disconnect between those in poverty and the resources available? We hypothesized that the main factors were bureaucracy/policy, education and access to resources such as transportation and technology.
And were you able to support these hypotheses?
We were. In terms of bureaucracy, we have found that there is a huge disconnect between public agency workers, who are the faces of help, and those who are in need of resources. Those public and social workers are limited by time and money to take on clients and give their full undivided attention. Oftentimes, these workers do want to help, but are bogged down by the bureaucracy of it all.
And when it comes to education, we found that many people are sometimes not aware of the resources available to them or don't know how to sign up. Without the knowledge of how to do these things, people are left without a safety net to catch them if they fall on hard times. Take food stamps, for example. You have to know when you can sign up, how to fill out the paperwork, who to turn the paperwork into, and know when you have to verify or renew your benefits. That's a lot for a person to figure out, especially if they're working to make ends meet and may not have access to resources such as the internet or even transportation.
And that leads us directly to the last factor we have hypothesized, access to resources. We found that the disconnect between those in poverty and the social safety nets there are to support them is heavily increased by the lack of access to things such as technology and transportation. In terms of technology, not everyone has access to a reliable internet connection or device that can assist them with finding the resources available to them. When it comes to transportation, in many instances, if you cannot fill out the forms yourself online, you would need to go to the government office that handles the specific assistance you are looking for. This requires some form of reliable transportation, which not everybody has access to. This again hinders those seeking help from accessing it.
Thank you two for your answers. We will now allow the Congresswoman from Mississippi to take over questioning. Congresswoman Laura, you may begin your questioning.
Now, Mary and Stephanie, you have been explaining your hypothesis for the disconnect between people and resources. But how are you finding a solution to this supposed disconnect of people and resources?
To address your question, we spent a lot of time researching the current rates of poverty in the United States. We examined the top two states with the highest and lowest rates of poverty to understand what these states were doing right or wrong in the fight against poverty.
The two states with the lowest poverty rates are currently Congresswoman Catalina's state of New Hampshire, as well as Utah. While the two states with the highest poverty rates are actually your state, Mississippi, Congresswoman Laura, as well as Louisiana.
We examined these four states in depth to understand how they ended up where they did in the poverty rankings. We examined their welfare programs or lack of, the factors we originally hypothesized were the reasons for the disconnect, and so much more.
With our understanding of poverty in these states, Mary and I believe that there is a solution that could help all of our states: gatekeepers. Gatekeepers would be a government program that would provide detailed and personalized assistance to those in poverty or entering poverty. Social workers, knowledgeable professionals, and volunteers would lend their skills to help create specific plans to access existing resources.
Essentially, this program would avoid the costly circles people have to take in order to learn about, apply, and receive assistance. The processes needed to receive resources are costly and time-consuming. Gatekeepers is more of a processing system of directing citizens in the correct direction. There are many people who need help but are unaware of the resources available to them, or conversely, they may not be aware but do not know where to begin the paperwork or do not have the technology to move forward.
I hear what you're saying, but before forming an opinion, if this is where to be disconnected seriously, where do you suggest the funding to come from?
Well, after some heavy debate, we believe looking at the budget and rearranging some finances will be enough to start the program. We propose that a higher tax on the top 1% of Americans will continue to fund the program and keep it running at an acceptable pace with plenty of resources. Of course, this is just a simple explanation for the sake of time, but it is further detailed in the bill itself.
One last question for the both of you. If we're to pass this legislation, what do you believe will be the result? Do you think poverty will be solved?
Of course, we would like to think that this bill could solve the issue of poverty, but I don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all solution. I do, however, believe that the passing of this bill will make extraordinary changes that will help a lot of people. This bill is a starting point to truly end poverty for all.
And with that, we are out of time. I want to thank you two for appearing before us today. We will now take a short recess and we will begin voting on this act when we resume.
All right then, folks. There you have it. Congress has just taken a short recess after that lengthy testimony and will be voting on the bill within the next hour. We will bring you live updates on the outcome of the End of Poverty for All Act right after this commercial break.